One of the most provocative topics in parenting may be the conversation that we have around ADHD. What it is, where it comes from, what to do if you think your child might have an ADHD diagnosis. How do we figure this out? That is the conversation we're having today on the Happy Families podcast, real parenting solutions every day. This is Australia's most downloaded parenting podcast. My name's Dr. Justin Coulson. And today, unfortunately, without Mrs. Happy Families, Kylie couldn't be with us. Today, like every Tuesday on the pod, we answer your tricky questions. Family, relationships, well-being, screens, discipline, all that stuff. And today, it's ADHD. If you would like to submit a tricky question, we've got a really super simple system that you can use at happyfamilies.com.au. Just scroll down to podcasts, click the record button, start talking. Alternatively, you can send us a voice note. Every now and again, though, the questions are so tricky that you trying to turn it into a tricky question becomes cumbersome. And that's what happened to Emily from Auckland. So instead, she sent me an email. And this is what she said. Hi, this is Emily from Auckland, New Zealand. I work in youth mental health and I love your podcast. I recently heard a mental health professional claim that ADHD isn't genetic, but is actually caused by highly sensitive children being in a hypervigilant stress state, and that we should look for stressors rather than medicate. We have an almost 8-year-old son showing ADHD indicators: inattention, daydreaming, getting in trouble for silly things, taking scary risks, and struggling with daily tasks that cause home tension. His occupational therapist and teachers see red flags, but he hasn't been formally diagnosed yet. We've been really proactive. He attended nature immersion kindergarten, now goes to a Rudolf Steiner school to reduce academic pressure and stress. Despite all of our efforts to set him up well, he still struggles significantly. My question is, should we pursue formal ADHD assessment or focus on addressing underlying stress and anxiety instead? This expert's theory suggests his symptoms are essentially our responsibility as parents to fix in his environment, which feels overwhelming. What's the best approach when you've already tried to minimize stresses but symptoms persist? Big question. Lots to talk about. Here's where we begin. First off, Emily, number one, this is a really thoughtful question. And I think that this is touching on one of the most important debates, and it really is a debate in child development today. Something that I want to emphasize is that when it comes to things to do with parenting and even diagnosis of psychological challenge or neurodevelopmental issues, there is a lot more confusion and contention and conflict in the scientific world than you might think when you pick up a book and read about it. Essentially, when you read what someone has to say about it in their book, they're saying, well, this is my opinion, and we're not going to bring in all the other stuff. But the science is not settled around ADHD, not even remotely. In fact, a couple of new books are coming on the market just now that describe how psychiatry has infiltrated everything that we do. And now we have labels for everyone and everything. And for a lot of people, they take a lot of comfort and a lot of support for that. And for many people, they need it. But many other people are getting those same labels and unfortunately are using them in less optimal ways that can, in too many cases, lead to maladaptive outcomes. There's also the question of medication. It's a really big thing. And the reason that people become so inflamed about it is because we actually don't know. And just because something really worked brilliantly well for one person doesn't mean it will work brilliantly well for another. And therefore, we're in this quandary. What do we do? So in this podcast episode, I'm going to try in about 10 minutes or less to give you a perspective that will integrate what we know about human motivation, as well as stress and physiology and neurology, and healthy emotional, social, and cognitive development. That's a lot in a really short amount of time. All right, I want to start off by addressing the current ADHD situation as it applies across most Western nations. This is the elephant in the room. This is not a popular thing to say. I recognize that it could even get me cancelled in some circles, but I need to highlight it. There was a 2021 systematic review in JAMA which found pretty convincing evidence that ADHD is overdiagnosed in children and adolescents, and increasingly, although it wasn't mentioned in this article, in adults, particularly for individuals with milder symptoms where the harm of receiving a diagnosis may actually outweigh any benefits of a diagnosis. Now, this is not anti-science. This is not anti-psychiatry. What it is a recognition that we've created a system that all too often pathologizes normal developmental variation. What do I mean by that? Well, fundamentally, what we find consistently in studies is that children who are among the youngest in their class or cohort are much more likely to receive an ADHD diagnosis. In other words, we might be diagnosing immaturity rather than a neurological or a psychological condition. Those behavioral differences show up as symptoms. They're actually just due to normal developmental timing. And let's not forget as well, sometimes kids might be older, but they still develop later. There's a whole lot of other stuff that we could talk about in terms of boys being more diagnosed than girls. And it's not just because girls are masking, it's because boys' neurological development maturity occurs more slowly than it does for girls, and a bunch more stuff. But I think that what's really missing from both sides of this debate, and really gets to the core of what your question is just a deeper understanding of what children actually need to thrive. So if you've been a long time listener to the Happy Families podcast, if you've read any of my books, you'll know that the overwhelming majority of the work that I do is based in this thing called self-determination theory. Self-determination theory tells us that all children, in fact, all adults, all of us, including those who show ADHD-like symptoms, have three basic psychological needs, and they are known as relatedness or connection, competence or an ability to master or at least progress in something, and autonomy, a sense of control. Okay, so research specifically examining ADHD through an SDT lens shows that kids who have ADHD symptoms are often experiencing high levels of what we would call need frustrating or need thwarting environments, and that parents or teachers in those environments might be using more controlling approaches in response to challenging behavior, or maybe the kids just don't feel like they're competent, they're not capable, and so they rebel, they become inattentive because they're struggling and they want to self-sabotage because that's better than looking dumb. Or maybe they're gifted and so they're just bored out of their brains. Or perhaps the relationships that they're experiencing around them just don't feel safe. In other words, your son's behaviors, things like daydreaming and risk-taking and difficulty with daily tasks, might be his brain or his nervous system attempting to meet basic psychological needs of feeling in control, feeling capable and competent, and feeling like I'm connected to others in environments that may not be supporting them optimally. Now, I don't know what's going on in your home and in your family. I don't know what relationships are like there. It might not be a relationship thing. It could be a competence thing. It could be a giftedness thing. There's any number of things there. But the first thing that I always do when I hear parents asking these kind of questions is I ask you to do a really thorough examination of your environment and also the school environment and other environments where he may struggle in those areas. My book, The Parenting Revolution, is a really deep and careful look at what we can do to navigate the environment more effectively. So that kind of addresses the let's put it back on the parents' side of things. Let's understand the environment, see what it means for the kids. After the break, I want to talk about development and also neuroinflammatory issues, and finally give you a framework for where you could move forward with. Okay, let's talk about ADHD and inflammation in the brain. Emerging research, and this is something that a lot of people are just not aware of at all. Emerging research shows that there's some pretty strong links between neuroinflammation and ADHD, including elevated pro-inflammatory cytokines in children with ADHD symptoms, and some evidence as well that early life stress and maternal immune activation during pregnancy can increase ADHD risk through inflammatory mechanisms. That's a mouthful. I had to write it down to make sure that I could read it to you and get it exactly right. I got this from a guy by the name of Dr. Bryce Joynson. He's based on the Gold Coast, and all of his work is on neuroinflammatory issues related to ADHD and autism. So what Dr. Joynson says consistently is that children with ADHD, according to plenty of studies, have increased oxidative stress, and that neuroinflammation activates different things in the brain which disrupt normal neurotransmitter function. So we've got animal studies that demonstrate this kind of neurotransmission challenge as well, and now we're starting to see it in adults. It means that there's more norepinephrine. It means that there's less dopamine, and it means that if we can reduce brain inflammation, and this is something that's still fairly new in the science, we've got to work out exactly how to do that, but it usually has to do with lots of time outside, really good diet, lots of movement and exercise. If we can get that stuff right, what we're going to find is that kids are going to have less neural inflammation, and we can literally reduce ADHD symptoms by reducing that neurological inflammation. Fascinating. Honestly, beyond my level of expertise, I've got to stop it there because I'm just going on the stuff that people who know way more than I do are pointing me towards, but I think it's fascinating. Here are a couple of other things that are important here. First off, the developmental perspective. Your son at the age of 8 is at this really crucial developmental transition. His executive function skills, so we're talking about attention regulation, we're talking about impulse control, working memory. These things are still really in a developmental phase. He's going to get better and better at emotion regulation, but he's going through a maturation phase here that's going to accelerate over the next little while. And honestly, you're going to see continued improvement with a couple of steps back now and then. Where your son is right now compared to his peers could be not at all about ADHD. It could just be normal developmental timing variations. Where he is right now compared to his peers could be it could be just a mismatch between environmental demands and his current developmental capacity. Like, just because most kids can do it doesn't mean that all kids can. Perhaps there's a nervous system stress response because of some unmet, frustrated, thwarted psychological needs. We've talked about that. And maybe rather than medication, he needs support. Now, the reality is maybe he needs medication. I don't know. I'm not there. But the fact that you've been so proactive with nature-based education and reduced academic pressure, that tells me that you know this intuitively. So here's where I want to challenge what your stress-focused expert has said. Research shows that kids with ADHD symptoms who develop a stress is enhancing mindset, that is, they see challenges as opportunities for learning rather than as threats, they just show more resilience. They show more regulation. So I don't want to see you reducing stresses. What I want to see instead is I want to see you build his capacity to handle appropriate challenges. When I'm looking at the letter that you've sent, I'm just thinking this kid needs to do more hard things. I know that sounds horrible and cruel, and it sounds like we're setting you up for a really, really hard future. But growth mindset interventions specifically designed for kids with ADHD symptoms show that when kids understand that their brain is neuroplastic and then it gets stronger by doing hard things, when they believe that they can develop their abilities through effort, they show improved attention regulation. They show reduced behavioral problems. They just seem to be more resilient. So what would I do? Here's my recommendation. At this point, he's 8. I'd say unless there's severe impairment, you've got time, so delay formal diagnosis for now. Use this year to try to optimize environment, build his capacity, and build that growth mindset. Second thing, I'd say address that inflammation pathway. Make sure he's getting enough sleep. It's absolutely crucial for neuroinflammation regulation. Look at anti-inflammatory nutrition. Omega-3s are big here. Minimize processed foods. If it comes out of a packet, try to get it out of his life. Don't be religious about it. Don't be fanatical about it, but be as good on this as you can be. Regular movement in nature. Your instincts about that outdoor education are spot on here. I love that you're doing that. And just stress management for the whole family. Next, do that basic psychological need audit. Have a look at how much choice he has in his life and in his daily routines. And it's not just choice. Autonomy is not about independence. It's about understanding the why. So when he does need to comply, just make sure that he knows why he needs to. Help him to find his strengths and build from there. Help him to, I think risk-taking is very much about courage and adventure-seeking and trying to build competence. I really do. And relatedness, want to make sure that he feels really connected and understood. Accepted, not just managed at home, at school, in all of his environments. Fourth thing, implement growth mindset practices. Teach him about neuroplasticity, that his brain literally grows new connections when he practices things. Use yet, most powerful, most resilient word in the English language. Use yet. I can't focus on this yet. And really focus on helping him to develop there. And I think reframe symptoms as information. So his daydreaming might just be an indicator of a rich inner life. He might just be a really creative kid. And he might also be bored at school. His risk-taking, I think, shows adventure and courage and a need for appropriate challenge because he wants to be competent. His struggles with routine tasks, they don't necessarily indicate ADHD. It might just mean that he doesn't get the point. And if he doesn't buy the why, then he's not going to act with volition, choice, and autonomy when you ask him to do stuff that's in the routine. He's got to know why. All right, let's wrap this up. In terms of assessment, if you do pursue assessment, it's going to cost a lot. It's going to take a lot of time, but do it comprehensively. Don't just go through a symptom checklist with your local GP. I think that that's unhelpful in the majority of cases. Studies show that only about half of clinicians follow diagnostic guidelines requiring symptom evidence from multiple sources and settings, but 93% of them are immediately willing to prescribe medication. And I just want you to find someone who understands development and trauma and giftedness and family systems, not just ADHD checklists. I want someone who's going to ask about the whole child, not just the symptoms. Fundamentally, here's the bottom line. A question like this, anyone who's wondering, you're not responsible for quote unquote fixing something that might not actually be broken. I think that your son is probably exactly who he's supposed to be. He just needs an environment that supports his unique nervous system and his developmental timeline and understands how his psychology works. We're not trying to eliminate all challenges. We're actually trying to do some capacity building so that he can meet those challenges with confidence and with competence. My experience with my own 6 kids is that sometimes our most difficult children are showing us that it's our system that needs an adjustment, and not that they need fixing or therapy or anything like that. I like what you're doing as a general rule. Keep trusting your instincts. I reckon you're going down the right path. And the fact that you're asking these really nuanced and careful questions means that you're probably already doing the most important thing, which is that you're seeing your child as a whole person and not a collection of symptoms. Development's not a race. Difference doesn't mean disordered. I really hope that this has been a helpful conversation for you, Emily. So glad that you asked the question. If you'd like more information or if you'd like to ask more tricky questions, jump online to happyfamilies.com.au, scroll down to the podcast section, press the record button and leave us your message. Love answering your tricky questions. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Coulson from Bridge Media. And if you'd like more resources to make your family happier, check out my book, The Parenting Revolution, or visit happyfamilies.com.au.